You are the one they all come to for advice. You are the emotional anchor in your group of friends, the unofficial therapist for your family, the person whose heart seems to have an infinite capacity for the suffering of others. You have been told your entire life that you are sensitive, that you have a big heart, and you have a kind of superpower. You feel things deeply. When a friend is in pain, you don't just sympathize, you feel a shadow of their pain in your own chest, a real and physical weight. You can walk into a room and instantly sense the unspoken tensions. The news of a distant tragedy can derail your entire day, leaving you with a profound and lingering sadness for people you have never met. Our culture has a name for this quality. It calls it empathy, and it has taught you to see this as your greatest virtue, a beautiful and almost sacred gift. But in the quiet moments after you have hung up the phone with a desperate friend, after you have absorbed another wave of the world's collective sorrow, a different feeling can arise. A feeling of profound and utter exhaustion, a sense that you are an emotional sponge, permanently saturated with the anxieties, the fears, and the grief of everyone around you. You feel a strange sense of being porous, as if the boundaries between your own feelings and the feelings of others are constantly being breached. You often find yourself asking, is this anxiety I feel mine, or did I absorb it from my colleague at work? Is this sadness from my own life, or am I still carrying the weight of the story my friend told me yesterday? Your own inner world, which should be your sanctuary, has become a crowded and noisy refugee camp for the emotions of others. And if you are truly honest with yourself, you might admit another difficult truth. For all the pain you absorb, you often feel strangely ineffective. You want so desperately to help, but in feeling the other person's panic so completely, you often find yourself just as paralyzed as they are. You become a co-sufferer, a fellow drowner rather than a lifeguard. You offer endless sympathy but rarely a clear and helpful path forward. You are celebrated for your kindness, but you secretly feel that your kindness is a form of powerlessness. What if this entire narrative is wrong? What if this celebrated sensitivity is not a gift to be cherished but a curse to be managed? What if your empathy, the very quality you have been taught to see as your greatest virtue, is actually your greatest weakness, a form of psychological porousness, a critical lack of emotional boundaries that is leaving you drained, ineffective, and perpetually overwhelmed by a world of pain? This video is a radical re-examination of our most praised virtue. We will argue that the kind of boundaryless emotional empathy our culture celebrates is a trap that leads to burnout and impotence. And we will show you how to fix it, how to begin the alchemical process of transforming your raw sensitivity from a crippling weakness into a focused, resilient, and truly effective strength. To begin the work of fixing our empathy, we must first understand its two very different forms. Our modern language is imprecise. We use the single, noble-sounding word, empathy, to describe two profoundly different and, in fact, opposing psychological states. The first is a state of weakness, of contagion and of suffering. The second is a state of strength, of detachment and of effectiveness. Ancient philosophers and modern psychologists alike have understood this crucial difference, and to heal ourselves, we must first relearn their forgotten vocabulary. Let us begin with the state that our culture so often praises as empathy, but which the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche identified as a dangerous and life-denying emotion: pity, Mitleid. Nietzsche saw pity not as a virtue, but as a weakness disguised as one. He argued that when you feel pity for another person, you are not truly helping them. You are simply allowing yourself to become infected by their suffering. You feel their sadness, their despair, their anxiety, and in doing so, you have not reduced the amount of suffering in the world. You have doubled it. Now there are two people suffering instead of one. For Nietzsche, pity is a morbid indulgence. It comes from a place of weakness, from a person who cannot bear to witness the difficult reality of another's struggle, and so they offer a superficial comfort, mainly to soothe their own discomfort. Modern psychology has given us a clinical term for this same phenomenon: empathic distress. This is when observing someone else's pain triggers a powerful, self-oriented, and aversive reaction in you. The focus immediately shifts from the other person to yourself. You feel overwhelmed, you feel panicked, and your primary motivation becomes to alleviate your own distressing feelings. This is the empathy that leads to burnout. It is the empathy that causes you to offer clumsy, premature advice, not because the other person needs it, but because you need the conversation to be over. It is the empathy that leaves you feeling drained and resentful. It is, in short, a form of contagious suffering. Now let us turn to the alternative, to the form of empathy that is a true and formidable strength. This is better described by the word compassion, as understood by the great Stoic philosophers. The Stoics, contrary to their reputation as emotionless stones, were sophisticated psychologists of the human heart. The Roman philosopher Seneca wrote extensively on this subject. He argued that the wise Stoic sage will, of course, help those in distress. They will offer aid, they will provide comfort, they will give rational guidance, but they will do so without taking on the other person's passions. He used a powerful analogy. The mind of the wise person should be like that of a doctor treating a patient. A good doctor must understand the patient's illness with perfect clarity and concern, but they do not become sick themselves. To become infected with the patient's disease would not be a sign of the doctor's superior empathy. It would be a sign of their professional failure. It would render them useless. In the same way, to become infected with another person's sadness, panic, or rage is to render yourself useless as a source of genuine help. True, effective empathy, the Stoics argued, is an art of compassionate detachment. It is the ability to see and understand another person's suffering with perfect clarity, what modern psychology calls cognitive empathy, combined with a rational and active desire to help, all while maintaining your own inner calm, your own strength. This form of empathy does not come from a place of shared weakness, but from a place of overflowing strength. It is not about feeling the other person's pain. It is about creating a safe and stable space where they can feel their own. This is the great division. The weakness our culture calls empathy is really Nietzschean pity, or empathic distress, a contagious and self-oriented suffering. The strength we should be striving for is Stoic compassion, a detached, clear-eyed, and effective desire to alleviate the suffering of others. One is a weakness, the other is a superpower. I have to confess that for most of my life I did not see my empathy as a weakness. I saw it as my one true superpower. I took a secret pride in my sensitivity. I was the one who could be counted on in a crisis, the one my friends would call at 2 in the morning, the one who could sit for hours and listen to another person's pain without flinching. This role gave me a sense of purpose. It made me feel needed, it made me feel virtuous, it made me feel strong. I believed that my ability to absorb the emotions of others was the very essence of my good character. And I was completely blind to the fact that this supposed strength was slowly and systematically destroying me. I remember a time when a close friend went through a devastating breakup. It was a chaotic and painful period for them, and I immediately stepped into my familiar role as the rescuer. I didn't just listen to their story of heartbreak and anxiety. I absorbed it. I stitched their pain into my own emotional skin. Their anxiety became my anxiety. Their sleepless nights became my sleepless nights. Their obsessive, looping thoughts about the situation became my obsessive, looping thoughts. My phone was never off, waiting for their next desperate text message. My own plans were constantly canceled or postponed to accommodate their emotional emergencies. I saw this as the ultimate act of friendship. I was all in. I was drowning with them, and I called it loyalty. But a strange and ugly thing began to happen. The longer the crisis went on, the more my own life began to fray at the edges. My work suffered, my other relationships became strained, and a deep, unshakable exhaustion settled into my bones. And worse, I realized that my help was completely ineffective. Because I was swimming in the same ocean of panic and despair as my friend, I had no perspective to offer. When they would spiral into catastrophic thinking, I would spiral with them. When they were consumed by sadness, I would be consumed by sadness. I wasn't a lifeguard standing on the solid ground of my own stability, able to offer a rope. I was just another person flailing in the water shouting, "Yes, this is terrible, we are definitely going to drown." And then came the most shameful feeling of all, a quiet, creeping, and bitter resentment. I began to resent my friend for their pain. I began to feel that they were draining me, that they were a bottomless pit of need. I started to see them as a burden. This, of course, filled me with a profound sense of guilt. How could I, the good and empathetic friend, be feeling such a monstrous and selfish thing? But this is the predictable and poisonous outcome of empathic distress. By taking on their suffering as my own, I had made their problem my problem. And because I could not solve it, I began to resent them for it. My empathy had not made me more loving. It had secretly made me more resentful. The great humbling confession is this: I had to finally admit that my empathy had not healed my friend. It had simply made me a second casualty of their crisis. I had confused the act of absorbing another person's pain with the act of helping them. I thought that to be a good friend, I had to prove my love by drowning alongside them. But a drowning person does not need another drowning person. They need someone on the boat, someone whose feet are planted on a firm and stable surface, someone who has the clarity of mind and the emotional strength to think strategically and throw them a rope. My empathy had not made me a healer, it had made me a willing victim. And the first step to developing a true, strong, and effective compassion was to admit that my greatest virtue had been my most effective and well-disguised form of self-destruction. To recognize that your empathy has become a form of self-destruction is the first step toward reclaiming it. The journey forward is not about learning to feel less. It is about learning to feel with more wisdom, with more strength, and with more skill. The goal is to transform your empathy from a porous weakness into a focused and effective strength. This is not about building a wall around your heart. It is about learning the art of compassionate detachment, a practice built on 3 core principles: creating a container, shifting your perception, and focusing on action. The first practice is to build a psychological container. The empath who is constantly drained is a person without boundaries. They are an open vessel, allowing the emotional states of others to flood and overwhelm them. You must learn to build a container for yourself. This begins with a simple act of visualization. Before you enter a difficult conversation, before you check the news, before you meet with a person whose energy you know is draining, take 30 seconds, close your eyes, and visualize a protective container of light or energy around your entire body. This is not an impenetrable wall. It is a semi-permeable membrane. You can decide what comes in and what stays out. The information about the other person's suffering can pass through with perfect clarity, but the raw, chaotic, and contagious energy of their emotion cannot. It is filtered at the membrane. You remain in your own center, in your own energetic space. This is not an act of coldness. It is an act of profound self-preservation. It is the first and most necessary step to ensure that you have something left to give. The second practice is a crucial cognitive shift. You must change your internal monologue from the language of weakness to the language of strength. The mantra of weak, contagious empathy is, "I feel your pain." This phrase, though it sounds noble, is the very source of the problem. It is an act of enmeshment. It collapses the boundary between you and the other person, ensuring that 2 people will now suffer instead of 1. The new mantra, the mantra of strong and effective compassion, is this: I see your pain. Think about the profound difference between those 2 statements. I feel your pain is ultimately an egocentric statement. It centers your emotional experience of their suffering. I see your pain, on the other hand, is an act of deep and respectful witnessing. It honors the other person's pain as their own, separate from you. It says, I am here with you, on the solid ground of my own stability, and I am looking at this difficult thing alongside you. I am not drowning in it, and I will not let you drown either. This shift from what psychologists call effective empathy, feeling with, to cognitive empathy, understanding with, creates the crucial distance needed for clear thought. You move from being a co-victim to being a calm, stable, and validating presence. This leads to the final and most practical step, You must focus on action, not on emotional absorption. Once you have your container and once you have shifted your perception to one of witnessing, you must change your mode of response. The default response of empathic distress is to get lost in the feeling. The powerful response of Stoic compassion is to focus on action. When confronted with another person's suffering, you must train yourself to ask one simple, pragmatic question. What in this situation is actually within my control? Often their feelings are not within your control. The external situation that is causing them pain is likely not within your control, but there are always small practical actions that are. Can you make them a cup of tea? Can you simply listen without interrupting for the next 10 minutes? Can you help them break down their problem into a series of small, manageable steps? This shifts you immediately from the powerless state of emotional absorption to the empowered state of rational, helpful action. You stop trying to fix their feelings, which is an impossible task, and you start offering concrete, practical, and genuinely useful support. This is the essence of effective healing. We began this journey with the portrait of the modern empath, a person celebrated for their great and sensitive heart, but privately crushed by the burden of that same sensitivity. We can now see the profound and dangerous error in this cultural ideal. The belief that to love someone is to absorb their pain, that to be a good friend is to suffer alongside them, is a beautiful and poetic lie. It does not heal the other person. It only succeeds in creating a second victim. It pulls you from the shore and into the same chaotic ocean, leaving two people to drown instead of one. The greatest and most compassionate gift you can give to a person who is drowning is not to jump in and drown with them. It is to plant your feet firmly on the shore, on the solid ground of your own stability, to think with clarity, and to throw them a rope. Your boundaries, your detachment, your inner calm, these are not selfish acts. They are the very foundation of your ability to be of genuine service to others. An effective healer cannot have a compromised immune system. An effective lifeguard cannot be a weak swimmer. True compassion, therefore, is not a soft and porous weakness. It is a profound and disciplined strength. And that strength is not born from a heart that is endlessly open to every passing emotion. It is forged in the quiet daily practice of a mind that has learned to be both deeply caring and powerfully detached. It is the art of seeing the pain of the world with an open heart, while maintaining a mind that is a calm and unshakable sanctuary. Learning to transform your empathy from a crippling weakness into a focused strength is one of the most vital skills for a chaotic world. If you are ready to become a more effective and resilient force for good, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. And share your experience in the comments. Tell us about a time your empathy has left you feeling drained, and what one small boundary you will set this week to begin the journey of becoming the lifeguard, not the second victim.